Our interview this morning is with James W. Gibson, who was born at Lawton, Oklahoma in August of 1937. Mr. Gibson served in the United States Air Force from 1951 until 1959 until 1961. His highest rank attained was Airman Second Class. This interview is conducted at Burleson, Texas on Friday, November the 12th, 2010. My name is Dale Dexheimer. I'm not related to James Gibson. Also in the room we have Milton Gibson, who is our videographer. This interview is conducted for the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress and also for Operation Remember, the city of Burleson, Texas. And with that little introduction, Jim, you can tell us your story of your time in the United States Air Force, sir, as you want to tell it.
Okay, well, let me start off by telling you about the reason that I went into the Air Force. I had received my notice from my draft board that I was due for my pre-induction physical, which to me meant that I was getting ready to go in the Army. It may not have been the case, but that was the way I saw it. So rather than do that, I ended up enlisting in the Air Force. And really looked forward to my enlistment. I guess I was kind of naive. Too many war movies or whatever. My eyes got opened in basic training. We went from, I think January, I know I did, went from January to April in basic training, learning that I didn't know anything, and then the military was going to straighten me up and teach me how to live. I will have to say that I did a lot of growing in so far as accepting responsibilities. I had a sergeant, my first duty assignment, my only duty assignment, in Vandenberg in California. I had a staff sergeant that was Swiss, and his native tongue was German, and his English was very hard to understand. And he was also an architect, and I was as a draftsman. Well, there wasn't much I could do right for that man. He had me over a barrel. I had 2 years drafting experience when I went in, but that didn't make him any difference. We were all in all the drafting military were in the same boat. We weren't very smart, and his job was to be sure we understood that. I and my wife lived some 40 miles from the base, of course, with my commanding officer's permission. I had to hitchhike to work. I didn't have a car, and I wasn't allowed to have driver's license. I made a stupid mistake when I went to the California Department of Motor Vehicles, and on the questionnaire it said something about, have you ever had dizziness or nausea, or I don't know, questions like that. And I thought, well, certainly, because when I was in grade school trying to play football, you threw up a few times and you darn right you got nauseous. So I didn't think anything about the question, and I put down yes. Well, that was the end of that, because they decided that I was probably, I had was epilepsy. So I couldn't get a driver's license. The Air Force ran a lot of tests on me to verify that I didn't have it. And they were satisfied that I didn't have it, but they wouldn't give me anything to take to the state of California so I could get a driver's license. So each day I had to hitchhike to work, which meant I got up pretty early, and I managed, I don't think there was ever a day that I was late. Of course, I'm not talking about basic training, but my first duty assignment was Vandenberg in California. It was a new base. I believe it had been previously called Camp Cook. And the Air Force reopened it in 1959. And I was offered the opportunity to be part of the work crew that updated the buildings and planted ice plant and made the place livable. I was assigned to the drafting room. Sergeant Moritz was my NCOIC, and he and I eventually got to be very good friends. But at first there was a lot of problems. I think most of it was my fault, but at the time I certainly wouldn't have admitted it. I was, like I said earlier, pretty immature at the time, and expected more out of the Air Force than they were going to give, and they expected a lot more out of me than I thought I was going to be giving. During my time in the Air Force, we were in no wars that I knew of. We were just about to get into Vietnam, and of course I didn't know that. But the Korean conflict had come to a truce, I believe in 1953, and
Go ahead.
in
Jim, I'm sorry.
1959, then I mentioned earlier I enlisted in the Air Force. And it wasn't until sometime probably in 60 or 61 that we began to have advisors, I believe they were called, in Vietnam. I didn't at the time even know that was going on. And the number of advisors increased probably monthly, if not daily. The nearest I came to ending up anywhere near there was they came up with a request for a draftsman in, they said Guam. We decided probably not, but who knew where you'd be if you weren't in Guam. The most exciting thing that happened while I was at Vandenberg would be the missile shots. They were trying to perfect the Thor and Atlas missiles at the time. The Cape Canaveral supposedly was perfecting the missile, and Vandenberg was working out the launching procedures. and neither was perfect. Probably, this may not be right, but probably half of the Atlas missiles that were fired while I was at Vandenberg were destroyed in mid-flight because of a malfunction. Those were actually very magnificent sights to see those explosions. I certainly wouldn't have wanted to have been within a couple of miles of them, but some of them, we had one missile that turned completely upside down. As I don't know, it probably wasn't 2 or 3 miles in the air, but it had turned nose down, and of course had to be destroyed before it just decided to fall down. I didn't have anything spectacular happen to me. I was responsible for our junior drafting trainees because I did have some experience. And this relieved my sergeant from having to mess with them. It was my responsibility. And then I was given the responsibility for the aerial survey maps that we kept in our safe. And the funny thing about it was, while I knew the combination, I couldn't open the safe. I could never, so I always had to get one of the other guys to open the safe because I absolutely cannot work a combination lock. It's not in me to do it. I'd like to read this, if you don't mind. At the time of my enlistment, I was given the same physical examination that all the other volunteer draftees went through, and I was found to be physically qualified, physically fit to serve in the military, and I enlisted in the Air Force. I went through and completed my basic training at Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio. This training lasted from January to, I believe, the 22nd of 1959 till approximately April 17th, 1959, and then I was assigned duty at Vandenberg Air Force Base in Lompoc, California, which is a military, it's a strategic air command base. And at the time it was a new base, we were opening it up. They were making it into a missile launch facility. I had nothing to do with that. My job was as a draftsman because I had experience. Prior to going in, I'd worked in northeast Oklahoma for Phillips Petroleum Company as a draftsman. And after I got my draft notice, I decided that really, since I wasn't going to get to be a draftsman there, I'd try to stay on land and rather than joining the Navy and possibly ending up on water, and that terrified me. I didn't want that. During the time that I was at Lackland, at Vandenberg, the drafting room personnel were used as we were volunteered to help other people move from building to building or office to office. And if you understand what I mean when I say we were volunteered, it was you were selected. And after doing that for quite a while, I started having some problems in my right leg and in my low back. I went to the hospital with it several times and was actually admitted to the hospital at Vandenberg. And then as an outpatient, was given heating pad treatments on my low back. Not my upper back, but my low back. Because I was having this low back problem and continued to have it, and the Air Force doctor that I was seeing got tired of seeing me, and he came to, once when I came into the sick bay, he came over to me and told me he didn't ever want to see me there again, and I asked him, what do I do? And it was shortly after that that they notified me that they were either going to do exploratory surgery on my low back or discharge me. And I was advised by a colonel in the hospital squadron that I should refuse the surgery because there was a distinct possibility that I could be paralyzed for life, or he's in his words, they didn't know what they were doing, didn't know what they were looking for, and you could be paralyzed for life. I didn't really see that as something I wanted to do. They later notified me that they were going to discharge me, telling me that I would, in fact, not be eligible for Air Force retirement, which was pretty obvious. I had been in some 2.5 years. And so I was discharged. I want to add this. I had a strained muscle in my right shoulder when I was in the 8th grade. This muscle pain lasted less than a week, I'm sorry. Later, even with this, I was able to play 1 year of high school basketball and 2 years of high school baseball. However, that didn't impress them. I was honorably discharged from the Air Force in June the 30th, I believe, of 1961. Very disappointed with the way life has turned out and my inability to utilize the VA for anything except my medicines. And if I'm hospitalized, but that's on a space available basis as I understand it. I've recently had to go to the hospital emergency room over here at Hughley, and the military, or the VA, has refused to pay any part of my hospital bill. They said I should have gone to the emergency room in Dallas. So my feeling toward the Army, toward the Air Force and the VA are somewhat different than a retiree. I believe that's about it for me.
Let me go back to Lawton.
All right.
What'd your folks do in Lawton, Jim?
Well, my dad was a butcher. He died in 1942. He had a brain tumor and died in surgery. My mother was just a housewife at the time. I shouldn't say just. And then she remarried. My stepfather, Lewis Thomas, was a very good guy. We didn't get along, but that was my fault again. Wasn't an easy person to, really, I was a jerk. But, and my granddad was a butcher, owned the stores, and my uncle, James, was a butcher. And I suppose if my dad had lived, he would have leaned me in that direction. I have older brothers, one living. He became a football coach and then a counselor, and he's retired in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. My oldest brother, Robert, died in 1986, right after Christmas, day after Christmas. My mother died in 96. So but Lawton.
You went to high school in Lawton, I guess?
No, I never did. I went to high school in a little town in southwest Oklahoma for my freshman and sophomore year in Tipton, Oklahoma. And then I finished my junior and senior year in Bartlesville, Oklahoma.
Oh, okay.
And then later,
Your stepdad, I guess, was he associated with Phillips?
No, he worked as an electrician.
Okay, but he was from Bartlesville? Or?
Right,
Okay.
from the Bartlesville area.
Okay.
I believe he was actually from Veneta, but he was working there in Bartlesville.
Okay.
Everybody knew him. Everybody. He's a well-known guy, well-liked.
You've indicated that you were difficult to understand, get along with, and yet you were a draftsman. Where did you get your drafting training? Did you go to tech school or?
I went to high school.
Went to high school. And I thought of that when you first said it, because when I went to high school, I remember it was an elective in the 9th grade.
Right.
I don't know when they quit drafting in high school, but you don't do it anymore, certainly.
Really? I didn't know that.
But you took high school drafting, and based on that, somebody gave you an opportunity on the board. Phillips.
Yeah, they offered me a job. So 3 days out of high school, I started working. It was Memorial Day weekend.
You were undisciplined or difficult to deal with, but you were a draftsman, which required a certain amount of discipline.
You bet.
This line has to intersect with this line at a certain place. You can't be off by 10 or 20 degrees.
No.
So you had sort of a dichotomy there.
I did. You're absolutely right. And I think it was good for me.
The drafting.
Yeah. I think it had a lot to do with me straightening my life out. because of that, because you had to learn to follow instructions, and as I matured, you started doing design work. Although the engineer, would check it, he's not going to sign something that is going to put his career in jeopardy.
When you enlisted, or when you were selected, you were not married.
I was.
You were? Okay.
I was.
When did you get married, Jim?
I got married in 1957.
So 2 years before you went in the military.
Right, right.
Okay. You have kids?
Not yet. No, we didn't have any
Okay.
children.
Okay.
Had one son while I was in the Air Force.
Okay.
He lives here in Burleson.
Going along, just looking at my notes here, Sergeant Moritz?
Yes.
Okay. Was this the same sergeant that spoke, the
Right.
fellow that was the German?
Right.
Swiss, whichever he was?
Right.
And initially, you and he had a little clash.
Absolutely.
Of course, he was the sergeant and you were the PFC, so we know who
Yes.
won that one.
Yes. Yes.
But later, as you worked together,
Because
both-
I grew up a little bit.
well, you grew up a little, maybe there was some mutual respect there, but he got to be a friend.
Yes.
Okay, sir. You went to Vandenberg, and really you were refurbishing the place, I guess. Maybe you were bringing it up to standard so
Yeah.
it could be a modern Air Force base and
Right.
instead of camp, whatever it was during the war.
Right.
Okay. I guess they put the missile silos in during that period of
They
time?
did. They did. In fact, one of the most exciting things that happened there. I was on leave when it happened, but they were going through a refueling exercise, and of course, it was a Titan missile, and as I understand it, it was sitting at the top of the silo, blew up. And my sergeant that lived there on the base, Sergeant Moritz, told me that he said, I thought it was an earthquake. He said, but I looked outside and he said the sky was red. It was at evening. It wasn't dark, but it was in the evening. He said the sky had turned red and he didn't know what to think. He really, I don't know if he thought it was the second coming or what, but it terrified him he felt totally helpless, he said.
You actually saw a number of missiles destroyed?
Oh, yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
they were in the infancy, so to speak, of
Yes,
missiles.
learning the launching procedure.
Generally, how far away were these missiles when I guess they exploded, they detonated the missile on purpose. It went astray and it
Right.
was, rather than hurt somebody, they
Right.
destroyed it.
They were always out over the ocean when they were destroyed.
Okay.
That was one of the things that we were involved in drafting was the Navy, or it was a naval military missile tracking, I believe, something to that effect. Anyway, they would bring over their charts and everything immediately after the launch, and we would run their charts, reproduce them. I don't know who for, but we'd give, that way they'd have the original plus a copy. And, excuse me. We always knew beforehand that they were going to have a launch. They would notify us because they were going to be coming over.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they'd notify you that they were going to have a launch like on a Thursday, and then there would be delays, and somebody's got to be there Thursday night. If it doesn't happen, somebody's got to be there Friday night until they call it off. If you've got to be there the whole weekend, somebody's got to be at the office. I never did have that happen to me, thank goodness.
Back up a little bit here. You couldn't get the driver's license
Yeah.
because you were honest and misunderstood, didn't realize that they would interpret your answer
I didn't know what the
as
question
being
was.
epileptic.
Yeah, that was what the question was looking for, and I didn't know it.
You lived 40 miles from the base,
Yeah,
and you hitchhiked to and from
every day.
every day. Wow.
Yeah,
How things have changed.
wow.
Did you're out there in the morning and you got your thumb out on Highway 101 or wherever you are out there.
Yeah,
Same people pick you up a number of.
one day I ran into or met a guy like Dan and Joanne Davis. And it was my good fortune that he picked me up one day and just told me that, he said, I go this way every day. And so for several months until I guess his job changed or whatever, I didn't have to worry about a hitchhiking. He would come over, because I'd have to be out there in the dark trying to thumb a ride, and he would pick me up, take me to work, and then take me home. And when my son was born, the day after, he took me to the hospital so that I could see my wife.
He was a civilian?
Yeah. I don't even remember what he did, but he was a true friend. I mean, that was strictly a voluntary thing on his part.
I guess I would have one other question. You lived 40 miles off the base. You couldn't find housing 20 miles or?
Couldn't find it, and if you could find it, you couldn't afford it.
You were Airman second or third, whatever?
Third.
And your wife, did your wife work?
No.
No, she didn't work.
She got
And your
part of my
income
life.
in 1960-61 as an E3, E4 was?
My first year I was in the Air Force. I remember this. My W-2, I believe it was $969 of taxable income.
Wow. Didn't party too much, did you?
We spent a lot of time at home. If I wasn't out on the highway trying to hitchhike to work, seriously.
Yeah.
We played a lot of cards, whatever.
Your situation with the VA, do you continue to pursue that at all, Jim, or have you just sort of given up on
I
it?
appealed it twice and they've rejected it, and so I've given up on it.
How long ago was the last appeal?
It's been over a year, so
Over
it's
a year.
dead.
But that's relatively recently. This is, you were discharged in 61, I think? 49 years ago?
But it's been a routine rejection. I mean, they don't look at it. They don't look at I have my medical paperwork that shows that they possibly suspected that I had a herniated disc, but they never considered that, other than wanting to do exploratory. but nobody explained anything to me. It was, you are in the military, they are in charge, and we'll tell you what we want you to know.
Have you ever taken your appeal to a congressman or a senator?
No, I haven't.
No?
The only reason I haven't is I always felt like it. I really did feel like they would give it some serious consideration, and it didn't. I don't think it got past the first clerk. And I have become so disappointed with them that I haven't pursued it. And I guess I'm 73, and maybe I've got 20 years till, maybe I've got 3, maybe tomorrow I'll die, I don't know. But I just don't want to go through the probable disappointment of somebody that sits at a desk and has certain criteria that they look for before they'll pass it on to somebody else. And somehow I don't measure up to it, so I get a little emotional when I think
Yes,
about
sir.
it. It's hard. I will, and I'm sorry. I don't. When somebody comes to me with I will never recommend them to enlist in the service. If you got to be in the service, you wait to be drafted, because, well, it's not as the military. I understand it is a dictatorship, and I knew that when I went in. I just didn't know how cruel they could be. They jumped my case. I broke my glasses after I went in, my own glasses that I had when I went in. And the captain that in the hospital squadron was all over me for not having a spare pair of glasses, and I told him I was never issued a pair of glasses. These are mine. And I guess he could tell by looking at whoever the manufacturer was, the frame. So he settled down after that, and I got my new glasses. But I never got a spare pair. And that, just small things like that made me almost despise some of the officers because of their arrogance. It was very, very disappointing to me.
I wish we could end on a happier note, sir.
I'm sorry.
No,
I really
no, I don't
sorry.
think you should be sorry, Jim. It's your experience, and you've told your story, and that's what these interviews are all about. It's historic record. It's what you feel, sir.
Well,
it's your experience.
I know it is, and if I had more time, maybe I could end on a happy note, but
Well, it's a nice sunny day.
yeah.
We thank you for your time
thank
this
you.
morning, sir.
Thank you for
Thank you
giving
for
me the
your
opportunity.
time in the military. Obviously, it would be a nice story if you had stayed and made E8, E9, whatever, and done your 25 years and come out retired, but it didn't work that way. So again, thank you, sir.
Yeah, you bet.